Hello guys, welcome to the next session of developing a console-based banking application using Java programming language. In the last session, we discussed on how we can implement a check bank balance functionality for the user in the banking system. In this session, we are going to work on one of the most important functionality, that is a fund transfer. So one user can transfer some amount to other users account. So that functionality we are going to implement in this particular session. So let's see how we can implement this functionality. So first of all, let me just take you to the main class, and inside the main class previously we have implemented this init admin, and we have the init customer method. Inside the init customer method, we are having the different functionalities that we want to give for the user. So let me just make one more functionality over here, which will be the third option, and that third option will be nothing but like fund transfer, something like this. And whenever user will choose the third option, then we will allow user to transfer the fund to the some other user account. Now again we have to add one more case over here, so let me just add one case. And over here, as of now, let me just add one break itself, and inside this we have to write some logic to like transfer the fund. So in order to transfer the fund, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create one new method. So let me just add one new method over here, and let me just make it as a private. As of now, let me just keep it as a void, and then let me just give the name as fund transfer, something like this. And this method we are going to call from our case 3. So let me just make it as a main dot fund transfer, or maybe over here we are not able to. Okay, yeah, now we are able to resolve this. So we have to call this fund transfer method. Now inside the fund transfer method, what we have to do is we have to ask a user to enter the pay account number. So let's enter one message for the user, like enter pay account user ID or user number, whatever you want to give. Now we have to take it inside one variable. So let me just take it like inside one variable, that pay account ID is equals to, and then we have to use scanner dot next, and we have already declared a scanner at the top, so we can use it directly over here. Now once we received a payee account number, then very first thing that we have to do is we have to validate this payee account number, because whatever account number is entered or whatever account ID is entered, that should be the valid account ID, right? So we have to first of all verify this. So in order to verify this, we can create a new method, because till now we haven't created any method to verify the account. So we can create a new method right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to write one more method over here, like private, and as of now let me just keep it as a void, and then let me just add the name as get user, and this user is going to take one parameter that will be a string user ID or account ID, whatever you want to give. Now what we can just do is we can just go to the service, and inside of the service we can create the similar method. So we have to make it as a public. As of now let me just keep it as a void, and then let me just make it as a get user, and again let me just give one parameter for this get user, which will be the string user ID. And again inside the repository also we have to create this similar method, because inside the repository itself we have to write a logic. So let me just give it as a public. As of now let me just keep it as a void, then let me just make it as a get user, and again we have to add one parameter which will be of type string, and parameter name will be the string user ID. And inside this method we have to write the actual logic. And if you just see, we are storing our users inside this users set. So what we have to do is we have to take this set, and then we have to match inside this set we have to like match our user ID that we have received. If this particular user ID is present inside this set, then that means our user ID is a valid user ID, and if it is not present, then it means that our user ID is not a valid user ID. So how we can do this? Like we have to just use users. Now again, there are multiple options. We can use for loop, for each loop, or maybe we can use a stream API. So I'm going to choose a stream API. So we have to like use users dot stream, and then we have to use a filter, and over here inside the filter we have to pass a predicate a lambda function. So how we can do this? We have to just use like user, and then we have to make it as like user dot get username dot equals, and then we have to pass like user ID, and at the end this particular filter returns us a list, so we have to collect it as a list. So let me just make it as a list. Okay, now this as I said, like this particular filter, whatever result of the filter is, we can collect it into a list, so we have to store it into the list reference. So how we can do? We can just use list of user, and we can just make it as a result is equals to. Now inside the result, the final filter data will be the stored. Then what we have to do is we have to just check like if result is not equals to empty. So we have to just check like result is not empty. If result is not empty, then what we can just do, like we can just return result dot get 0. So we can return like result dot get 0, or else we can just return null, something like this. And now we are getting some errors over here, and this is why, because we have provided return type as a void, but we want to return some results now, so we can change the return type to the user, something like this. Now our get user method is ready. What we can just do, we can just go to the services, and inside the services we can just add like user repository dot get user, and then we can pass user ID. Now this particular method is going to return us a users object, so we can return it directly from our service method also. Again we are getting the issue. This is due to the void return type. So let me just change it to the user, and now our service method is also ready. We can just go to the main class, and inside the main class what we can just do, we can just make it as a user service dot get user, and we can just pass the user ID. And again similarly, the service method is going to return us a user object, so we can return directly from this method also. So again we have to change the return type to the user, something like this. Now our get user method is ready. What we can just do, we can just call this method from here. So we can just call it as like get user ID, and we can just pass our payee account ID as a parameter. Now we can just store the result inside the users object, something like this. Now if this particular account ID is valid, then we will receive the user object over here, and if it is invalid, then we will receive the user as a null. So what we can just do, we can just check like if user not equals to null, then we can do the further operations. Else we can put one message like please enter valid username, something like this. We can give something some similar messages, please enter valid username. Now as of now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put one message over here like valid username inside the if condition, just to test. In a moment I'm just going to remove it. Now let me just save these changes, and let me just restart the application. Let's see whether we are able to achieve whatever we have done till now or not. So let me just put the username to login. So let me just make it as a user2, then user2, and again we can see there are three options. I'm just going to choose the third option. Then over here we have to enter the like payee account ID. So as of now, if you just see, we have three different accounts. So let me just put the valid account as of now. Let's say user 4. And now if you just see, it is saying like valid username. Now let me just try with the invalid user ID, and let me just put some random user ID. And now if you just see, it is saying like please enter valid username. So our current functionality is working as expected. The next thing that we have to do is, now if our username is valid, the next thing that we have to do is we have to just ask user to enter amount. So please, or maybe the enter amount to transfer, something like this. And again, what we have to do, we have to just store it inside the double. Amount is equals to scanner dot next double, something like this. Now again, there is one thing, like we have to check amount also, like this amount should not be greater than the balance of this particular user ID. Like this amount should not be the greater than the balance, right? If we have the sufficient balance, then and only then we will be able to transfer it to some other user, right? So that functionality we have to also implement. So how we can implement this? What we can just do, we can just first of all use our check bank balance method that we have created in the last session itself. So check bank balance, what it will do, it will just take the user ID as a parameter, and then based on the user ID it will return us the current bank balance. So we can use the same method over here, but the one thing is this particular method takes the user ID as a parameter. So let's see how we can add this in our fund transfer method. So what we can just do, we can just use check bank balance, and now over here we have to pass the user ID, but as of now we don't have the user ID inside our fund transfer method. So what we can just do, we can just add one parameter of type user over here, and then if you just see on line number 103 we are getting some issues, and this is why, because now we have to pass user details over here. And where are we getting those user details? We are getting it inside the init customers parameter. So if you just see, like we are getting the user over here, like current logged in user details, that details we have to pass here, something like this. And now we will be able to, like now we will be able to get the current user ID inside the fund transfer method. Over here we are getting some issues. This is due to the like conflicting name. So let me just give some different name to my parameter. And now what we can just do, we can just make it as a user details which we received as a parameter. We have to just pass the username like this, and now it will return us the double and users account balance. We can just store it inside the user account balance variable. Now we have to compare the user's account balance and the amount that we have received over here. So what we have to do, we have to just check like if user account balance is greater than or equals to amount, then and only then we will be able to allow the fund transfer, else we will just show the message like your balance is insufficient, something like this. So we are going, what we are going to do is we are just going to give some message like your balance is insufficient, and maybe we can just give some balance over here, like maybe we can just put the user account balance, something like this. And if our balance is like if our balance is as expected, then we can allow the fund transfer. So let's first of all test this functionality, whether we are getting any issues or how it is working as expected or not. So let me just put the user ID like user2, then user2, then let me just choose a fund transfer, then pay account number as a user 4, and amount, let's suppose inside the user repository. So if we see, like for the user 2 the account balance is 1000, so what we can just do, we can just put 1000 rupees. So yes, we are not getting any message, that means it is working as expected. And again, let me just choose the third option, then user 4 again, and now let me just put some greater amount. So now if you just see, your balance is insufficient and we are getting balance also. Now it is working as expected. The only thing that we have left back is we have to just like perform some transaction. So how we can do, like we can just go to the main, and then what we can just do is like we can just call some methods from the user services. Obviously these methods are not created yet, so we have to create those methods. So how we can do, like we will create one method inside a service which will allow us to take some inputs and which will help us to perform the debit and credit transactions. So how we can do, like we can just go to the user service and we can just use public. As of now, let me just keep it as a void, and then let me just give the name as transfer amount. Now over here we need three different parameters. So first of all, we need uh, the customer user ID or current logged in user ID. So let me just pass the first parameter as user ID. Then second parameter we need is pay user ID, and the last parameter that we need is amount that we want to transfer. Once we received these three parameters, then what we can just do, we can just go to the user repository and we can create a similar method over there. So let me just copy this method and let me just go to the user repository and let me just create some similar method over there also. Now again, inside this transfer amount, we want to perform two different operations. First one is a debit and then second one is a credit. So what we want to do is, we like from one account we have to perform a debit transaction, and from the pay account we have to perform a credit transaction. So how we can do, again we can create with the help of different methods. So let me just make it as a private void, and let me just maybe make it as a debit. And for the debit, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put user ID as a parameter, and then double amount as a second parameter. Then what we have to do inside this is, first of all, we have to like get the user details. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get the user details with the help of this get user method. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to call get user, and I'm just going to pass user ID over here, and then let me just store it like this particular get user returns us the user. Then let me just store it inside user, something like this. And then once we received the user, then the second thing that we have to do is we have to like take the account balance. So let me just make it as get account balance, and let me just store it inside the account balance, account balance, something like this. And now the next thing that we have to do is we have to like perform the transaction. So how we can perform, we can just make it as double final balance is equals to account balance minus amount. So this final balance will be the balance or a new updated balance that we want to store back to this particular set. But again, performing a update operation inside a set is not a straightforward. So what we have to do is, because the set doesn't allow the duplicates, and set like will not be able to allow uh, the duplicate user IDs, right? So that is the reason what we have to do is we have to remove this particular user, like we have to remove this particular object, like old object, and then we have to put a new object inside the list again. So how we can do this, we can just do one thing. Once we received a account balance, then we can just do like we can just make it as users, which is our set name dot remove, and then what we can just do, we can just pass a user over here, something like this. And then once we removed the user, what we can just do, we can just calculate our final balance. And once we received a final balance, what we can just do, like we can just put users dot set account balance, and then we can just make it as a final balance. And now this user will contain a like updated balance or final balance. So what we can just do, like we can just again insert it users dot add, and we can just again insert this particular user back to the set. So this is how this particular debit method will work. Similarly, we have to create a credit method. So we can just copy this particular method and we can just paste it again. We can just change the name like to the credit, something like this. And again, the rest of the options will be the similar. The only thing that we have to do is we have to just, instead of the minus, we have to use it as a plus, something like this. And now let me just save these changes. Now our debit and credit methods are are ready. What we can just do, we can just call it from our transfer amount method. So what we can just do, like we can just first of all call a debit. We can just pass our user ID comma amount, and then similarly we can call credit. Then over here we have to pass a pay user ID, and then we have to pass a amount. And once we we performed a credit and debit all the operations, then what we can just do, we can just do one more thing. We can just return some results from over here. So what we can just do, um, we can return the add method result. So it will return us boolean value. So we have to like change the return type to the boolean. And similarly we can just return from the credit method also, because we can at least verify some results, right? So that is the reason I just want some results from these particular methods. So what we can just do now, we can just store boolean is debit is equals to, and then boolean is credit is equals to, something like this. And now what we can just do, like if, or maybe we can just directly return is credit or maybe is debit. So we can just use some sequence and is credit, something like this. And again we are getting some issues. This is why, due to we have used a void return type. So let me make it as a boolean. Now our transfer amount method is ready. What we can just do, we can just go to the user service and we can just call our user repository dot transfer amount method. So we have to pass first of all user ID, then pay account number or maybe pay account ID, and then lastly we have to pass a amount. And again, whatever reason it will whatever result it will return, we have to return it from our service method also. So let me just change the return type, something like this. And now this particular method we have to call it from our main class. So how we can call, we can just use user service dot transfer amount. And now three parameters we want to pass over here. First of all, the user ID. That user ID we will get from our user details. So user details dot get username. Then the second parameter is nothing but a pay account ID. So let me just pass that second parameter. And the third parameter is nothing but the amount. So let me just pass that amount over here. Make sure you are just passing the right parameters, because we have like two different amounts over here. First one will be the first amount is nothing but the user entered amount that user want to transfer, and second is nothing but actual account balance. So make sure you are just passing the correct values over here, and we can just store the result inside the boolean variable. And lastly we can just check, like if result, then we can just make it as amount transferred successfully, something like this. And then else what we can just do, like we can just make it as a transfer failed, else transfer failed, something like this. And now we are done with all the changes. Let's see by running the project. So let me just start the application and let's see how it works basically. So let me just go to the user repository as of now, and let me just log in with the user 2. So let's suppose user 2 wants to transfer some money to the user 4. Let's see how it works. Let me log in with the user 2, and then let me just transfer, use the third option, that is fund transfer. Then pay account ID is nothing but user 4. Now let me just put some account amount. So as of now user 2 is having 1000 rupees, so let me just maybe transfer the 500, and as we can see, like, amount transferred successfully. Now users 2 balance should be the 500. Let's see the bank balance, and if you just see, like, the bank balance is a 500 for the user 2. Now what we can just do is we can just exit from the user 2 and we can log in with the user 4, and now we can check user 4 balance. So it should be like 2500 because 2000 was the earlier balance and 500 is deposited by the user 2. So we can just check, like, bank balance, and if you just see, the bank balance is nothing but a 2500. So our transfer amount functionality is working as expected, and like, we did a lot of small changes and we created a lot of methods. So make sure that you are creating all the methods as expected, and our functionality is also working as expected. If you still have any questions, let me know into a comment section and I will try my best to help out in that case. In the next session we will work on how we can maintain this transaction history for the user, so that user can check all the transactions that he or she did in the past. So we are going to work on that functionality also. So I hope you enjoyed this session. I'll see you in the next session.